Let us be grateful that a year ago, no one could tell us it would be a year. A year without seeing friends. A year without eating at your favorite restaurant. A year without going to a ball game. What would you have said if someone said you'd go a year without going to a movie? Or a live concert? Or the theater? Yeah, it might be better if we didn't know. And the truth is, that list is the easy stuff. It's been much worse than missing movies if you lost your job, or lost your whole business, or lost someone you love. 500,000 Americans who caught the virus didn't make it through the last year. More lives than we lost in World War I and World War II and Vietnam combined. So many that for the first time in many decades, life expectancy in America dropped by nearly a full year. So it's a lost year in more ways than one. Tonight, a look back at all we've lost as we try to move toward an end of this coronavirus crisis. Good evening. We're so glad you're with us. It is so hard to believe that 366 days ago, we reported the first coronavirus cases in Michigan. A year with so much change, and yet the pandemic isn't over.
And tonight we look at how far we've come in our fight against COVID-19, how we're still hurting, and how we as Metro Detroiters are finding our way through these tumultuous times.
From our early vaccine success to how first responders, myself included, struggled in the early days to battle this virus.
You know, before 2020, how many of us ever thought we would experience a pandemic, a part of history we're still living despite the new calendar year? 10 or 15 years from now, it won't be surprising if something really bad and really awful is just referred to as a 2020. Those of us who didn't grow up in the Depression or live through a world war had our first massive extended common crisis. What area of your life wasn't impacted by the pandemic? Going to work, running to the grocery, going out to eat? Nope, nope, and nope. Now replaced by Zoom, Instacart, and DoorDash. Holiday get-togethers with family? Maybe just through a screen, because the least loving thing you could do to a loved one was pass along a deadly virus that you didn't even know you had. In those early days, many of us were afraid to touch anything. It's a strange war when your fears are dialed in on handshakes and doorknobs. But this invisible enemy is impossible to detect. And too many people only realized they'd come in contact with it when they suddenly found they'd lost their sense of taste, or smell, or a fever set in. Testing was a mess, especially early on, but the tests came back positive for almost 30 million Americans. Most of them fought it off at home, barely noticing. But others headed for the hospital, and that's where sometimes an overwhelmed nurse would hold an iPad so that someone could say a final, sadly inadequate, digital goodbye. 2020, the year of so much grief, but without proper grieving. So often in our 245-year history, when despair has come knocking, Americans have found a way to draw together. But in many ways, that didn't happen this time. In fact, coronavirus had the opposite effect, it seemed. Wearing a mask somehow became a political act. Online warfare broke out over the most unlikely of subjects, like hydroxychloroquine.
You are in violation of my constitutional rights.
Something closer to actual warfare broke out in spats between Americans divided over proper COVID precautions. And as we head into the second year of COVID, the fights remain intense. Debates over the limits of power, and over how much is too much and how much just isn't enough, from stimulus checks to restaurant restrictions. And for a long, long time, we'll be revisiting and debating the big decisions and whether they saved lives or lost them.
We're just trying to do what we can to make sure that we take care of our most vulnerable folks here in Detroit.
I had one stop where she had tears in her eyes.
Give back, make your mark on the world.
And yet, let's not miss it. We've tried hard in our newscast to celebrate the good. So many people did answer the bell. First responders who insisted they weren't heroes when so clearly they were. In fact, heroes seem to show up all over the place. Whether they were organizing a drive-by birthday celebration or just leaving an extra fat tip to try to help a restaurant keep the lights on. The grocery store workers who kept showing up even though they knew their job was putting them right in the line of viral fire. Hopefully, we'll remember that. And if you're lucky, if you didn't lose a loved one, or a job, or a home, maybe you'll remember 2020 as the year your family was drawn together, when simpler things helped us slow down and reorder our priorities just a little. 500,000 lives lost will do that.
You know, we see and we hear those heartbreaking numbers of every person we've lost to COVID-19, the toll it's taken on families around the world and right here in our community. It's still really difficult to fathom. Taking a look at the latest coronavirus numbers.
Michigan reports 2,091 new cases of coronavirus and 23 more lives lost. 16 identified through a vital records check. Overall, since the pandemic began, Michigan has had 603,375 cases.
The good news tonight, there are 3 vaccines available to help protect us from COVID-19. We could feel the excitement and hope as the first Pfizer shots rolled out of its manufacturing facility in Portage in mid-December. The second emergency use authorization came for Moderna a few days later on December 18th. Then on February 27th, the news Johnson & Johnson's vaccine would also be available.
Now, each of the 3 vaccines has gone through an intense FDA review process.
They've also been the subject of day-long public meetings where a panel of independent experts dug through the data, ultimately recommending each for emergency use.
Leading that critical committee, Dr. Arnold Monto, a world-renowned epidemiologist from the University of Michigan School of Public Health. We asked Dr. Monto to reflect on the vaccine's success and what's next.
These vaccines, the ones that have been approved, are so above the expectation.
The original goal of the COVID-19 vaccines was to be at least 50 to 60% effective. They've far surpassed that. Dr. Arnold Monto says their success has been a great surprise.
Not so much because of the speed with which they were produced, but with the luck at having the design of some of the vaccines all worked out in advance because of work that was done on the original SARS and on MERS. It was a relatively simple vaccine to produce. One part of the virus seems to produce protection.
He says the biggest challenge facing the FDA's Vaccine Advisory Committee has not been evaluating the actual vaccines, but rather not being able to gather in person to do it.
The biggest challenge is really the fact that we're doing this remotely. We really have little opportunity to have the kind of discussion that you would have where you didn't have to be recognized and not talk over somebody else.
Monto cautions there is always a potential risk of unexpected reactions with new vaccines. However,
the probability of that is very low. With most vaccines, if you see problems, you're going to see them early, usually in the first 6 weeks. And now we've had these vaccines used in millions of people.
He's very concerned about people who are reluctant to get vaccinated.
Those people who are thinking about not getting the vaccine should look at those who really want to get the vaccine, who are doing all sorts of things to get the vaccine, and say, am I missing something? Because they are.
Monto also cautions against states dropping precautions prematurely.
I'm very upset and concerned about those states who are just throwing everything away. Everybody who's tried to predict what's going to happen tomorrow with this virus has been wrong. And to really throw caution to the winds, to open everything up all of a sudden is not the way to go, because you want to do it gradually and see what the effects are.
As for when things will be more normal,
I have a feeling things are going to be better this summer. We may still be wearing masks, but that's just a petty annoyance. Things are going to gradually be better. And I think the key thing to do is to do it gradually.
Dr. Amanto says there will be more vaccines coming before the advisory committee for their consideration. They may also be called on to examine the data on how the vaccines perform in children once those trials are finished.
And Frank, having 3 vaccines has created an interesting situation, especially in the city of Detroit, where Mayor Mike Duggan caused a little bit of a stir by initially declining a shipment of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine.
Now, he has since, of course, started a clinic specifically for giving out that vaccine. But what do you say to people who are concerned the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, at least in the test results, doesn't look to many to be as effective as the others?
Well, you know, Kim and Devin, the vaccines weren't tested at the same time in the same places, so it's just not possible scientifically to truly compare them head to head. With vaccine in such short supply, the CDC has been very clear about their advice to get the first vaccine that is available to you. Now, there's research in progress to actually see if a second dose of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine could boost the protection of that shot even higher. But for now, we know that all 3 vaccines reduce the risk of being hospitalized or dying from COVID-19, and ultimately, that is what matters the most.
So right. Now, the demand for the vaccine has far outweighed the supply so far. Local 4 has been tracking the vaccine since the first doses were available.
It's better to get the shot than to get sick and end up in the hospital. It didn't hurt. I didn't have a reaction.
Meta Chapman was the first Detroiter to get the vaccine at the TCF Center. City also offering senior Saturday appointments at churches. Across Michigan, those eligible for a vaccine are able to sign up through major health systems and at most county health departments. But getting the appointments has been a struggle, especially for seniors, leaving many relieved when their turn finally comes.
Oh, I was thrilled. I couldn't believe it. I was just so thank God.
You know, Meijer and drugstores like Rite Aid are also offering the vaccine, and the latest information on where to get your vaccine is on the homepage of our website at clickondetroit.com. Frank?
Well, the life-saving vaccines that everyone is waiting their turn to get wouldn't be possible without the many hundreds of thousands of brave volunteers who signed up to participate in the clinical trials in the U.S. and around the world.
That's right, and one of those volunteers is a member of our Local 4 family whose experience has given us an inside look at this critical research.
Well, here we are, decided to participate in a COVID-19 vaccine study. This is a phase 3. It's with Pfizer and BioNTech. I, for one, am just tired of watching this virus give us all one big gut punch every day.
Local 4 assignment editor Matt Triplett says he wanted to do everything he could to help end the pandemic. After researching the various trials, he signed up without hesitation.
Well, I'm here for the 3rd appointment for this Pfizer study on this COVID vaccine. Today, they're just going to be drawing some blood to see if those of us that might be getting the actual vaccine are building up antibodies to fight this thing off. So let's all hope for the best.
The motivation was personal.
I know 6 people have died from it. Another 6 or 7 I know have gotten sick from it.
Matt didn't know if he was receiving the actual vaccine or the placebo.
I didn't have any serious effects from this. I did get a slight headache. The one time I got some chills.
When he heard Pfizer announce the vaccine was 95% effective, he was thrilled.
It's almost like an early Christmas present. And it's like, finally, there's some light at the end of the tunnel. It's not the train coming at us anymore. We're actually getting closer to the end now.
After learning the side effects other volunteers had suffered during the clinical trial, Matt suspected he had received the placebo, and he was right.
It's Friday morning, January 15th, 2021. I'm heading back to the clinic for another appointment with the Pfizer study. I was called Monday and notified that I have been receiving placebo, not the actual vaccine. They offered for me to slide over to the other side of the study and receive the vaccines. I've agreed to be part of the study again, go back, and this morning I will receive my first injection of the actual vaccine. Well, it's official. I finally been vaccinated. I gotta admit, this feels really good. Here it is. It's February 3rd, about 11:30 in the morning. I just walked out from getting my second dose of the Pfizer vaccine. Like I said earlier, you feel that little pinch when they put the needle in you. Now let's see if I get any kind of side effects. Keep in touch. Several hours after I got the second dose that night, I had a real light chill. My arm was a little bit sore. Took a Motrin and fell asleep for the night. Woke up the next day feeling great, and I felt great ever since.
It's a feeling he wants everyone to have.
If you get your chance, please go get the vaccine. Please go get the vaccine.
And Matt Triplett, we are so proud of you.
Sure are.
Yeah. Volunteers in the Pfizer trial will continue to be monitored for 2 years.
And that data will be essential in determining how long the vaccine's protection actually lasts.
All right, a key group getting the vaccine now, teachers. As many students return to in-person learning, one teacher takes us through this very different school year.
Coming up, how the pandemic affected businesses all over Metro Detroit and how many of you who tried to file for unemployment were shut out here in Michigan. That story is coming up.
And how many have died from COVID in Michigan nursing homes? No one seems to be able to get a straight answer. Local 4 Defender Karen Drew with the search for answers right after the break.
You know, they almost lost me twice.
It was truly a miracle.
I mean, God gave me a second chance. I've been reborn because of this.